Hey everyone, get comfortable because today's story is a roller coaster of emotions and resilience. It's about Clara, a 23-year-old college student who worked tirelessly for years, saving every penny she could to fund her future. But just when she thought she was on track to graduate, everything changed. Her own father, someone she trusted completely, drained her $42,000 college fund while she was studying abroad. This jaw-dropping account was originally shared on Reddit by an anonymous user with the name ClaraFightsBack, and it quickly exploded across subreddits like r/AmITheA hole and r/LegalAdvice. Thousands of people weighed in, offering their support, advice, and sometimes heated debates about family loyalty and justice. Clara's story takes us through her shock, her pain, and ultimately her fight to reclaim her future. It's not just about the money, it's about boundaries, betrayal, and finding the strength to stand up for yourself, even when it means going against family. If you've ever dealt with someone crossing boundaries, manipulating you, or trying to take something you've worked so hard for, this story will hit close to home. So buckle up, this one's filled with drama, legal battles, and life-changing lessons. And don't forget to let me know in the comments, what would you do if you were in Clara's shoes? Now, let's dive into this incredible story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph. Have you ever put your trust in someone so deeply, only to find out they betrayed you in a way that completely shatters your world? That's exactly what happened to me. My name is Clara. I'm 23, and this is the story of how my own father stole my future and left me scrambling to pick up the pieces. Let me explain. Growing up, I was always taught that hard work paid off. I wasn't born into privilege, so I knew if I wanted a brighter future, I'd have to earn it. From the age of 16, I juggled school, part-time jobs, and tutoring gigs, saving every penny I could. By the time I was accepted into my dream university, I'd built a college fund of $42,000, thanks to scholarships, summers working double shifts, and living frugally. I even picked up extra shifts as a barista just to make sure I had enough for emergencies. That money wasn't just a fund to me, it was my ticket to a better life. But everything changed during my semester abroad in Florence, a trip I'd worked tirelessly to afford. One night, while sitting in my tiny apartment overlooking the cobblestone streets, I received a casual phone call from my father. His words hit me like a truck. "I used the money, but don't worry, you're smart, you'll figure it out." My entire college fund, gone. He drained every last cent without a second thought. I was stunned. This was the man I had trusted the most, the man I believed would support me no matter what. Instead, he'd used the money I'd worked so hard for to pay off his debts, leaving me stranded with no way to pay for my senior year. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. What would you do in my shoes? How do you confront the person who is supposed to be your biggest supporter when they've become the source of your greatest betrayal? I need your advice, because I don't know where to go from here. When I picked up the phone that night, I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. My dad had a habit of calling at random times, usually to share some mundane update or ask how things were going. But this time, his voice was different, too casual, almost rehearsed. I didn't even have time to say hello before he dropped the bombshell. "So, honey," he began, his tone light, as if he were talking about the weather, "I needed to clear up some debts, and I used the money in your account." At first, I didn't understand. "What money?" I asked, already feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "Your college fund," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You didn't need it anyway, right? You're so smart, you'll figure something out." The casual way he said it made my head spin. My heart pounded as I tried to process what I was hearing. I asked him how much was left, still clinging to the hope that maybe he hadn't taken all of it. His answer made my blood run cold. "None of it's left," he admitted, his voice still calm, like this wasn't the betrayal of a lifetime. "But don't worry, you're tough, Clara. You'll land on your feet." I could barely breathe. My college fund, every penny I'd worked for since high school, was gone. Just like that, I remember sitting in stunned silence, staring at the wall of my apartment in Florence. Outside, I could hear people laughing and chatting in the street below, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. "How could you do this?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. He sighed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Look, it's done now. No point in getting upset about it. Besides, it's just money, Clara. Family is more important. Just money? Just money? It wasn't just money to me. It was my future. It was 4 years of sleepless nights, double shifts, and sacrifices. It was proof that I could take care of myself, that I didn't need anyone to hand me anything. And now, it was gone, because of him. After I hung up, I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing. How could he do this? How could someone who was supposed to love and protect me destroy everything I'd worked so hard for? And the worst part was, I couldn't stop him. That's when I realized the account had remained under his name since I was 17. Back then, I'd thought it was just a formality, something the bank required because I was a minor. I never imagined he would use it against me like this. I trusted him. I never thought I'd need to protect myself from my own father. The next few days were a blur of emotions. Anger, betrayal, sadness. But beneath all of that was something else. Determination. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I started by pulling up the account statements online, tracing every withdrawal he'd made. Each transaction felt like a punch to the gut. $1,000 here, $2,000 there. Each transfer was small enough to avoid raising any red flags, but together they added up to $42,000, my entire fund. I couldn't believe the audacity. He hadn't even tried to hide it. The withdrawals were all recent, too, made over the course of a single month, while I was thousands of miles away and unable to do anything about it. My phone buzzed with another text from him. Don't stress about the money. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break from school. I know some guys who could get you a modeling job. Better money than that degree. I wanted to scream. He was acting like he'd done me a favor, like he was giving me life advice. Did he really think I'd just smile and nod after everything he'd done? The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was about what it represented. He didn't respect me, or my dreams. To him, my education was a luxury, something I could give up if it meant bailing him out. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know where to start. Confronting him felt pointless. He clearly didn't see anything wrong with what he'd done. Legal action was an option, but the account had his name on it too, which meant he might get away with it. And as much as I wanted to cut ties completely, the thought of walking away without holding him accountable didn't sit right with me. I decided to reach out for help. I called my university's financial aid office to see if there were any emergency funding options available. I contacted a local legal aid service to ask about my rights. I even confided in my grandmother, who was furious when she found out what had happened. He's gone too far this time, she said. Don't worry, Clara. We'll figure this out together. Her support meant everything to me. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. But I'm still at a crossroads. Part of me wants to go nuclear. Take him to court, expose him for the manipulative person he is, but another part of me wonders if it's worth the emotional toll. He's my father, after all. As much as I hate what he's done, cutting him out of my life entirely feels like losing a part of myself. So now I'm turning to you, the community, for advice. What should I do? Should I confront him and try to work things out? Should I take legal action and make him pay for what he's done? Or should I just walk away and focus on rebuilding my life without him? I've never felt so lost. Please, share your thoughts. I need your guidance now more than ever. When I posted my story, I didn't know what to expect. Would people understand my pain? Would they tell me I was overreacting? Or worse, would they say I was selfish for even considering taking action against my own father? The responses, however, came pouring in, thousands of them, and they were as passionate as they were divided. One of the first comments that caught my eye was from a user named Justice for All. You need to hold him accountable. That money was your future, and he had no right to take it. Legal action might be messy, but if you let this slide, he'll never face the consequences of his actions. You worked too hard to let him get away with this. Reading that made my heart race. It was exactly how I felt, angry, betrayed, and determined not to let him get away with it. But as much as I wanted to jump into action, there were other voices urging caution. Another user, Family First for Life, wrote, I know you're hurt, and you have every right to be. but he's still your father. Maybe he's struggling more than you realize. It doesn't excuse what he did, but before you go nuclear, try talking to him. See if there's a way to work this out without ruining the relationship completely. This one stopped me in my tracks. Was I being too harsh? Could there really be a way to salvage our relationship without compromising my values? As much as I hated what he'd done, I couldn't deny the part of me that still wanted to believe he cared about me, at least enough to make things right. Then there were the comments that cut straight to the core of my dilemma. Like this one from Tough Love 101. Let's be real. If he's willing to steal from his own daughter, he doesn't respect you or your future. Cutting ties might be the only way to protect yourself in the long run. Sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about trust, and he broke that trust in the worst possible way. That comment hit hard. Trust had always been the foundation of my relationship with my dad, and now it was gone. Could it ever be rebuilt? As I scrolled through hundreds of responses, I saw how polarized the community was. Some people were firmly in my corner, urging me to take legal action and hold him accountable. Others encouraged me to try to salvage the relationship, warning that cutting him out completely might leave me with regrets. And then there were those who sympathized with my dad, suggesting that his actions might have been a desperate cry for help rather than a calculated betrayal. The tension in the comments was palpable. People were debating with each other, challenging each other's perspectives, and offering their own stories of betrayal and reconciliation. I found myself overwhelmed by the sheer volume of advice. Some comments made me feel validated, while others made me question whether I was being too rigid or emotional. But one thing was clear. I couldn't ignore what had happened. I had to make a decision, not just for myself, but for my future. Reading your advice opened my eyes to options I hadn't considered. It made me realize that this wasn't just about the money, it was about my self-worth, my boundaries, and the kind of relationship I wanted to have with my father, if any. I knew what I had to do next. After reading all your comments, I knew I couldn't let this slide. Every word of support, every warning, every story shared by those who had been through something similar, it all gave me the strength to take the next step. I realized this wasn't just about reclaiming the money my father had taken. It was about standing up for myself and showing him that his actions had consequences. The first thing I did was start documenting everything. I pulled up my online bank account and downloaded months of statements, carefully marking every withdrawal he had made. It was a painful process, seeing the steady drain of money that I had worked so hard to save. Each transaction felt like a fresh betrayal, a reminder that the man I trusted most had been siphoning away my future without a second thought. Next, I went through my phone and compiled every text and email he had ever sent me about the college fund. There it was, in black and white. Messages where he had acknowledged the money was meant for my education, casual mentions of borrowing it, and even promises to pay it back someday. While none of these were legally binding, I knew they painted a picture of his intentions, or lack thereof. The hardest part was reaching out to my grandmother. She's always been the rock of our family, the person everyone turns to when things fall apart. I hesitated before calling her, worried about how she would react. Would she believe me? Would she take my side? When I finally told her everything, I was met with a long, heavy silence. "That man," she said finally, her voice shaking with anger. "He's been pulling this kind of nonsense his whole life, and we've all let him get away with it. Not this time, Clara. Not this time." Her support was a turning point for me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting this battle alone. As we talked, it became clear that my father's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. Over the years, he had manipulated and taken advantage of others in the family, always with a smile and a flimsy excuse. He'd borrowed money from my grandmother more times than she could count, always promising to pay it back but never following through. He'd even taken my cousin's birthday money once, claiming it was for an emergency. This pattern of behavior wasn't new, it was just my turn to be his victim. With my grandmother's help, I reached out to my aunt Sarah, who happens to be a lawyer. I laid everything out for her, the bank statements, the text messages, and the full story of how he had drained my account. Sarah didn't sugarcoat things. She told me that because his name was still on the account, pursuing legal action would be complicated, but she also said that there were other ways to hold him accountable. Start by confronting him, she advised. Let him know you're not backing down, and make it clear that this isn't going away. So I drafted a message to my father. I wanted to be clear, firm, and unemotional. No pleading, no anger, just the facts. Dad, I wrote, I've reviewed the bank statements and have documented every withdrawal you made from my college fund. This money was intended for my education, and you knew that. I need to understand how you plan to repay it. Please let me know your proposed solution. I hit send and waited, my heart pounding. Hours passed with no response. Finally, my phone buzzed. It was him. It's just money, his reply read. Family is more important. You need to stop stressing about this and move on. Move on? I stared at his message in disbelief. He had stolen $42,000, everything I had saved over years of hard work, and his response was to tell me to move on. To him, it was just money. But to me, it was my future, my independence, my dreams of finishing college and building the life I had envisioned for myself. I felt a mix of emotions, rage, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of determination. His dismissive response only solidified my resolve to see this through. He wasn't going to get away with it. Not this time. But now I'm at a crossroads. Do I escalate this legally, knowing it could mean a bitter and drawn-out fight? Or do I try to resolve this within the family, hoping he'll come to his senses and make things right? Part of me worries that taking legal action will tear our family apart, but another part of me wonders if that's even my responsibility to worry about anymore. He made his choices. Shouldn't he face the consequences? I'm turning to you, the community, once again. Should I escalate this legally, or am I taking it too far? Is there a way to hold him accountable without losing the rest of my family in the process? I've come this far, but I still don't have all the answers. Your advice got me through the first step. Now I need your guidance again. What should I do next? When I told my family about my decision to escalate things, I could feel the weight of it hanging over me. My grandmother and Aunt Sarah stood by me, unwavering in their support, but I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Confronting my father would mean opening the door to more manipulation, more denial, and possibly losing whatever fragile connection I still had with him. Still, I had no choice. This was about more than just the money. It was about reclaiming my future and proving to myself that I deserved better. It all started with the legal demand letter Aunt Sarah helped draft. It was concise, professional, and unflinchingly clear. My father was to repay the $42,000 he had taken from my college fund, either in full or through a structured repayment plan. If he didn't comply, further legal action would follow. My aunt sent it via certified mail to ensure there was no way he could claim he hadn't received it. When he called me after getting the letter, his voice was dripping with anger. "Clara, what the hell is this?" he snapped. "You're really threatening to sue your own father over some money? What happened to family being more important?" I took a deep breath, keeping my tone steady. "Dad, it's not just money, it was my future, and I gave you a chance to make this right, but you didn't take it seriously. Now, this is the only way forward." He scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing this out of proportion. You're listening to your grandmother and Sarah too much. They're turning you against me. I can't believe my own daughter would betray me like this." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. Betray him? After what he'd done to me? His attempts to flip the narrative only fueled my determination. I told him the conversation was over and that he could respond to the demand letter through Sarah. Then I hung up. That's when the guilt-tripping texts began. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own father," one message read. Another said, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me." He even tried to paint himself as the victim to other family members, twisting the story to make it seem like I was being unreasonable. I braced myself for the fallout, but to my surprise, my family didn't buy into his manipulations. My grandmother, always the pillar of strength, shut him down immediately. "You stole from your daughter," she told him bluntly. "You don't get to play the victim here." Other relatives started coming forward with their own stories of how he had taken advantage of them over the years. My Aunt Patricia revealed that he had once borrowed money from her children's college savings, promising to return it with interest, only to conveniently forget about it later. Cousins and distant relatives chimed in, sharing how he had used similar tactics on them. His carefully constructed facade of the generous, fun-loving family man was crumbling before his eyes. When he realized his usual tactics weren't working, he tried another approach: avoidance. He ignored the demand letter entirely, hoping it would go away. But Aunt Sarah wasn't about to let that happen. She followed up with more legal pressure, making it clear that this wasn't something he could simply brush aside. Eventually, he agreed to a repayment plan, though not without plenty of grumbling. The payments were small at first, but they represented something I never thought I'd see from him: accountability. For the first time, he was being forced to face the consequences of his actions, and it was all because I refused to back down. Meanwhile, I threw myself into finishing my degree. The university's financial aid office helped me secure emergency funding, and my grandmother insisted on contributing what she could. I picked up a part-time job to cover the rest, juggling work and school in a way that was exhausting but necessary. When I finally walked across that stage at graduation, the sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. I had done it. Despite everything, I had done it. After graduation, I landed a job at a marketing firm in the city, a position I'd worked tirelessly to earn. My first paycheck felt like a victory, proof that I could build a life for myself on my own terms. I moved into a small apartment, decorated it with secondhand finds, and slowly began to rebuild the sense of security that had been stolen from me. As for my father, I made the decision to cut ties. His attempts to manipulate me didn't stop, but I stopped engaging. Every text, every voicemail, every passive-aggressive comment he made through family members, it all rolled off me. I had grown stronger, more resilient, and his words no longer had the power to hurt me. He thought he'd derail my future, but his betrayal only made me stronger. What he didn't realize was that by taking everything from me, he had forced me to fight for myself in a way I never had before. And I won. The final repayment from my father arrived a year later. It was a small amount, hardly enough to make up for the stress and heartache he had caused, but it represented closure. I filed the receipt away with all the other documents from this ordeal, not as a reminder of what I had lost, but as proof of what I had overcome. Looking back, I'm proud of the person I've become. My father's actions may have been a betrayal, but they also taught me the importance of standing up for myself and valuing my own worth. I learned that family isn't about blind loyalty, it's about mutual respect and trust. And when that trust is broken, it's okay to walk away. My story didn't end the way he thought it would. It ended with me thriving despite him, and for that, I'm grateful. Looking back on everything, I realize this story isn't just about losing a college fund. It's about something much bigger: trust, resilience, and finding the strength to stand up for yourself, even when it's the hardest thing to do. My father's betrayal shook me to my core, but it also taught me lessons that I'll carry for the rest of my life. First, I learned the importance of setting boundaries. For years, I ignored the warning signs: small lies, broken promises, and casual dismissals, because I wanted to believe my father was someone I could trust. But trust without boundaries isn't trust at all. It's just a way to let others take advantage of you. By standing my ground and demanding accountability, I showed myself that my future and my well-being are worth protecting. Second, I learned the value of holding manipulators accountable. Confronting my father wasn't easy, and at times it felt like an uphill battle. But refusing to let him sweep this under the rug was a turning point, not just for me, but for others in my family who had been hurt by his actions. Sometimes, accountability isn't just about justice, it's about breaking cycles of manipulation and standing up for what's right. Finally, I learned that betrayal doesn't have to define you. My father tried to take everything from me, but in the end his actions only made me stronger. I built my life despite his betrayal, and I'm proud of the person I've become. If anything, his attempts to derail me showed me just how much I'm capable of overcoming. To anyone out there facing a similar challenge, don't let someone else's actions determine your worth. You're stronger than you think, and you have the power to take control of your life. even in the face of betrayal. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you trusted? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories and continue this conversation. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to AGS Stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. Your support helps us bring you real-life tales of resilience, justice, and triumph every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.